Okay.
That's a very good point. Welcome everybody. So just before I share my screen, just so you know who you're talking to, I'm Sarah Stones, and if we have time for a chat at the end of this, someone just remind me to stop sharing my screen because I always forget. And just do that one. Make sure I've got the right one. Yeah. So I'll just leave it another couple of minutes, everybody. But it would be great to know in the chat who you are and whereabouts in the country you are. And I know everybody said when they were signing up what their biggest challenges are. But if there's anything that you think would be useful for me to know, then just stick it in the chat and I'll keep that open and try and keep an eye on the chat as we go through. And Julie, I don't know if there's anything that comes up that I miss. Would it be all right to ask you if you could just point it out?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Will do. I know it's hard when you're presenting, isn't it, to keep your eye on everything. Yes, I can do, yeah.
So Jacqueline, Melbourne, is that Melbourne, Australia or Melbourne, Lincolnshire? Or I'm sure that's, oh, fantastic. What? So it must be very early in the day for you there. Oh my goodness me. Wow. That's amazing. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, it's raining here too, Adele. It's and your 14-year-old son, I think that's 14 is a very tricky age, isn't it? And I'm just reading a brilliant book about the development of the teenage brain and how there is so much going on for them at their age. I've read lots of other books, but this one in particular is absolutely brilliant. So I will get started because I'm aware it's now nearly 4:05. I'm also very aware it's probably at the end of a very long day for you all. And not just Jacqueline, who's 1 o'clock in the morning. So welcome and thank you for joining us. As hopefully you've all had the email, and as I said in the email, there's the resources that I've sent you, and hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at that. Now, today will be a bit of a whistle-stop tour around motivation. I do normally do much longer sessions than this, but it's meant to be a real taster session, but something that you should all have something really useful to take away that you can use straight away. So you can connect with me in lots of ways, and I would love to have conversations with you and know what particular this has sparked for you in the future. So hopefully you will have all received this chart. If you have or you haven't had time to download it, because I know I only sent it out yesterday, if you've got a pen, just do a table on a piece of paper in front of you, and it really doesn't matter that you haven't got the boxes filled in, but down one side or the other, just pop any names in there of any particular pupils or your children or anyone that you've got particular concerns or challenges with. Now, I just thought I'd touch on very quickly Corona, COVID. We all know it's a huge challenge. And I think for all of us, we've been through different stages on this curve as we've gone through the last 6 months. And I think it's really important to recognise that actually that is very, very normal, and that actually movement along this curve is both ways. So I'm sure, like me, you'll have started feeling, right, I've got the hang of all of this, and then you'll be slipping back down into that low mood and low energy. And I think children, oh, thank you, Julie. It's minimised. So has everybody got the whole screen? Can you see? Yeah. So I wonder if you could just let me, yeah, I think it might be yours, Julie.
Yeah, sorry, I think it was me.
Yeah. Sorry about that, everyone. Like me, you'll have all gone through this curve, but it's also important to know that the kids will be going through this curve as well. And actually the speed that we've gone through this curve is very dependent on our motivation. So I'm not going to tell you about how I've got to do this because we haven't really got time, but suffice to say, by the end of this session, you will know that I am so passionate that motivation is something that we don't pay enough attention to. And it is so, so crucial. You'll see that also that it's not about sitting people in front of inspirational speakers. Motivation is very, very intrinsic. And I get very cross when people talk about me or to me or introduce me as a motivational speaker, because there's more than that. So, and actually this quote sums it up for me, in that if we know what motivates the kids that we're teaching or your children, you can support them in the best way for them. And the reason for that, you'll know as well as I do, what a difference it makes when we're actually looking forward to what we're getting out of bed for, and when we're motivated to jump out of bed. And actually we can see from this slide, and don't worry about taking too many notes, we will send the slides out to everybody. But you can see the impact of motivation on performance here, and particularly when we've got kids that you know have got the intelligence to achieve a huge amount, but they're not motivated. That's where we've got to really think a lot more deeply about actually how can we engage these children. And there's really simple reasons why. I had no idea before I started learning about motivation about 5 or 6 years ago now, what an impact it makes on the way that we think and the way that we learn. And for me, the bottom line as well is actually when we hear so much about mental health and children suffering with poor mental health, whether that's depression or whether it's anxiety, if we are motivated, we are less likely to have to be in that more difficult position. And actually, if we can focus on keeping people motivated and people learning about their emotions and the fact that coming back to that curve, we will all have down days, but if we know what we need to support ourselves and to support the people that we're working with, then we're in a much better place. So our motivators do affect everything that we do, our decision making, even our attitude to risk and change, and the environment. And if I don't come back to the environment, someone remind me when we get to the growth motivators. It's really important to remember 2 things. A, motivation and skills are very different. We can have all the skills in the world, but if we're not motivated to use them, then we won't. And our motivation changes as we go through life. And actually it's not connected to our skills. So if I use a very personal example, I'm really good at spreadsheets. Would I want to be in a career using spreadsheets every day? Not at all. It's totally demotivating. So when we're talking to kids about career options and GCSE choices, it's crucial to be thinking about actually not only what are you good at, but also what do you really enjoy doing? Because our motivation drives us to achieve. Now, if any of you have read Daniel Pink, he's written a book called Drive, and that's all about motivation. And Daniel Pink says that there are 3 motivators, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Now, I actually think that there are more than 3 motivators, and the model I use has 9 different motivators that fall into 3 clear groups, and those are the RAG, and those 3 groups are relationships, achievement, and growth. And if anybody remembers Maslow's hierarchy of needs from any studies, the relationship motivators are the ones that sit at the bottom of the hierarchy, going up to the growth motivators at the top. Now, our motivators, as I've said, affect our attitude to change and risk. So people with strong relationship motivators tend to be quite risk averse and need time to think, whereas people with growth motivators tend to be really, oh, if I've had an idea, I'm going to go off and do it now, and very fast and very decisive. And I'll go into a bit more detail on that in a minute. So, but you can also, we all have all 9 motivators, and we could have motivators that are really important to us that don't necessarily sit together. So, for example, if one motivator, we need freedom and independence, and the other motivator, we want friendships, actually those 2 motivators can cause conflict between what we want to do, whether we want to spend time on our own or with other people. But our motivators also impact the language, and this is where it's really interesting, because even after this short webinar, if you focus on the language that you're using with your children or your students, you should be able to start having glimpses of what those motivators are. So the relationship motivated people, these are the people that will give you so much detail. When you ask them about going for a run, for example, they'll tell you who they saw, what they saw, what the view was like, lots and lots of detail. When it comes to, and they will also tell you about how it felt really good to be out there. When it comes to the people with strong achievement motivators, it's very visual, but it'll be, oh, I did the running 30 seconds shorter than I did it yesterday, or I beat so-and-so on the run, because they'll be very competitive. And they'll give you so much detail when you ask. And so you can see that that's very different to the people with the strong relationship motivators. Think about what you look at when you're reading a magazine or a newspaper or reading a report. If you've got strong growth motivators and you just want to go straight to the point, it may be that the first thing you look for is the summary. You don't want lots of detail unless it really is of great interest to you. And then you'll look at the detail, but the first thing that you look for, and this is where actually you'll know this anyway, but in terms of the motivation, the importance of being able to display information in these 3 different styles so that you're engaging students. But that is sort of the overview. But now I'm going to come and talk through the 9 different motivators. And if you've got any questions, either take yourself off mute or just drop it in the chat. Does it all make sense so far? Has anybody got any questions at the moment? Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. So I'm starting with the searcher motivator, which is a high growth motivator. And as teachers, it is likely that you have all read that slide and will be thinking, yeah, I need to see that I'm making a difference, and I need to see how it's fitting, what I'm doing fits into the larger picture. And I don't know if any of you have been in jobs, if you do recognise this as a high motivator, if any of you have been in jobs where you haven't been given and received good feedback, you will know quite how demotivating and actually demoralising that can be. So, and you can see for students with a high searcher motivator, learning and knowing how what they are learning is going to fit in to the wider picture. Why do they need to learn about X or Y? How will it help them in the longer term? Is absolutely crucial, particularly for searchers. So the defender is the first motivator I'm going to talk about in terms of the relationship motivators. And you'll see that the pictures that I've used for each motivator are really depictive of these motivators. So the defender motivator is all about security and stability. And I particularly chose the picture of a lighthouse. I could have easily chosen a picture of a very old oak tree, because people with defender motivators tend to be very comfortable within their comfort zone and don't like being pushed outside of that comfort zone. And I think particularly the older we get, the less likely we want to go out of that comfort zone if we've got a strong need for stability and security. It could be that you're in a job that you don't particularly enjoy, or in an environment that you don't enjoy, but you don't want to make that move to another job because you've got that security and stability where you are. And it's about, when you're working with students, it's about getting them to look at the risk of not trying new things. We all know that there's no such thing as failure. We learn so much from everything we do, and we actually learn more when we get something wrong than when we get it right. So it's about pushing those students and making sure a really good way, funnily enough, of noticing students with high defender motivators. They are so, or colleagues actually, they are so organised. They get all their bags ready the night before. They'll work with tidy desks. They're amazing organisers. I actually was recruiting a member of my team recently, and I did motivational map reports that show me what an individual's key motivators are. And I particularly recruited somebody with a high defender motivator because I know that they'll be really organised. The next motivator is a friend, which is the students for whom COVID and lockdown was so difficult, because they really thrive on that social interaction, even more than the average student. Now, this can be people with just a really small, tight-knit group of friends, or it can be people with really broad friendship groups. Using students' names rather than, so starting sentences with Sarah, can you do this? Or Michelle, can you do this for me? Or Michelle, what do you think? It's crucial for these students. It makes a real difference. The people that love having recognition and respect and social esteem, we refer to this as a star motivator. And these are children, if any of you have had more than one child and one's really responded well to having a star chart on the fridge or the kitchen cupboard, and the other one hasn't, that's a real indicator that one of your children at that stage had a star motivator. And I've spoken to parents who have said, actually they don't work, star charts don't work at all. and it's because this motivator isn't important. So if you've got students with high star motivators, it's about really making sure that in whatever way you can recognise them and you can maybe get them to the front of the class to do things rather than them sitting at the back when they're answering questions. It's about utilising that knowledge of how can we give them a bit more recognition, because that really motivates them. With adults, you tend to see it in people in offices who maybe don't have to put all their certificates on the wall, but actually all their certificates are on the wall. But I was working with a young man who had a high star motivator. He got quite a lot of football trophies, but they were all up in his bedroom. So Mum brought them down and put them out so that when people were visiting pre-COVID, they could see them and he could get that recognition for those trophies. And the same if your kids get certificates at school. If they've got a high star motivator, put them in a public place in the house rather than in the bedroom, because that'll really help. And it's all of these things are so simple, you think, actually, will that make a difference? And it does. So the first of the achievement motivators is the competitive one, which is all about winning competitions and achieving goals. Kids with high builder motivators love having really clear goals. And it may be to win something in class. At home it could be, well, if you've done X, Y and Z, you can choose what we're having for dinner or what we're watching on TV. It's about thinking about how can we set goals for this person to achieve, and actually can we link them to days out, can we link them to an extra rewarding class. It's not all about material satisfaction, it's about competition. So the director, if you're in a classroom, you will probably know exactly who your kids are that have a strong director motivator. They're the bossy kids. You can always see them in the primary school playgrounds, but actually they love having responsibility, and that really does motivate them. So again, outside of school we can give them things to take charge of in the home. Inside of school, give them responsibilities for different things and relate those to the curriculum where you can, so that actually they're being able to use that motivator that gives them that enjoyment for being responsible for things. And actually, if we know that is a real key motivator for someone. If they aren't doing their homework, or they aren't behaving in the classroom, that's something that will be really meaningful for them if you have to take it away. So, for example, if you're giving kids rewards for achieving things, actually, depending on the reward you give will depend on how motivating that is. Does that make sense? So, in understanding the different motivators, that's where we can start applying the right rewards that will motivate, or the right pulls for them in terms of increasing their engagement. The expert motivator is these kids and adults, again, that love learning. And I think particularly these may be the children that have really thrived in lockdown, again, depending on what their other motivators are. But if they are a spirit, which we'll come on to, so they enjoy having that independence to do what they want to do when they want to do it, and they enjoy learning, actually they'll have been able to get on with self-directed learning so well. Now, for kids that love learning, if they've got this motivator, they also love being mentored and having a mentor, but B, mentoring others, which again is a really good thing to get them involved in passing information on and helping those kids that maybe are struggling a bit more. Now, the creator is the first growth motivator. Now, remember what I said about the people with high growth motivators are quick thinking, they are very kinesthetic, so if something feels right, they'll do it. And if they see something that can be improved, they want to do it. Now, the creator motivator is all about innovation and change. People with high creator motivators love problem solving. So the more problems you can give someone, the better. They also love being in different environments. And I realise that it's not always possible, and particularly while we've got COVID around. But one suggestion I've made is actually post-COVID, just having a group of desks in the classroom where actually anybody can go and sit, rather than having named desks, because actually kids with high creators like to move around. They've got quite much shorter spans of attention, so they need to be kept engaged by doing different things, and they will often kids and adults enjoy working outside or in a bright, airy space. If you've got children with high creator motivators, you'll probably find them moving around and not always doing the homework in the same room. And actually being outside is really important as well. For kids with the high growth motivators, timekeeping is a real issue because it's something that they don't tend to pay a lot of attention to. So it's about having lots of clocks around as well. I have seen quite a few children, not all of them, and it's really interesting, but quite a few children who are on the spectrum have high growth motivators, but interestingly, where they have high friend motivators, for example, that's where it's been really interesting to find out what those motivators are so that we can help them to meet those motivators, because obviously if they've got difficulties engaging with other people, but they've got a high friend motivator, it is likely that that motivator won't be easily met. So we've got to think about ways that we can support them with that so that it doesn't have a bigger impact on their mental health. I hope that makes sense as well. So the spirit motivator is all about not being told when to do it, how to do it, and what to do. Now, a really quick, simple one is if you've got younger children, rather than saying, put your shoes on, just asking them a question now. Which shoe are you going to put on first, your right or your left? Same question, but actually they've got a choice in which they do. Now, obviously that doesn't work as well with older children, but it's about giving them choice. Would you like to brush your teeth first or read a story before bedtime? Would you like, you're all teaching different subjects, but if you can think about giving them a choice of two things, you want them to do both. It may actually be a very similar thing that you're asking them to do, but you're giving them two questions to answer so they can choose to sit here or there rather than you putting them in groups. And that will give them that feeling that their freedom and independence is being met a lot more effectively. Now that is all the 9 different motivators. And actually it's about being inclusive and being able to support students. And I think it's about being able to give them that additional energy. I think I see being able to motivate students, it's a bit like when we take vitamin C, it's that boost that we all need. And if we can support them if we know what motivates them, we can support them in the right way. Now, I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any questions at this point? Not at the moment. I'll come off shared screen in a minute because I'm sure there will be questions. But I'm also very aware that when you've got a class of children, you cannot and will not have the time to be thinking, oh, I need to do X for this student and Y for this student. And that's why we're able to, when we analyse, I use a 10-minute online questionnaire that shows us very, very clearly not only what the key motivators are for each student, but crucially, how well those motivators are being met. And I'm sure without me even explaining this chart, you can see on the motivation audit that on the whole, we've got a really motivated staff team here. So I do the same, I work with adults and children. Now, in the staff team, if Andy is a key member of staff, I know from this chart that Andy's level of motivation, whilst it's quite high, only his top motivator is being met. His second and his third motivator aren't being met at all. Now, the other way around for Sean's top motivator is only being met 2 out of 10. So for Sean's top motivator is his spirit, which is his need for freedom and independence, and that is not being met at all. Now, those two members of staff may be likely to be looking for other roles. If we have conversations with them, we may be able to tweak their work and ensure that actually two really good members of staff wouldn't be leaving us. Now, we can also do this for classes, and we can very easily pick up those children that may be disengaged, and we can pick up if we were setting a group task. So I'm picking teams for which children are going to work in which group. We can then split them up so that they are all in groups where they can use their key motivators. And this can be put on the wall without the motivation audit on the end. And actually, it's a great PHSE tool as well, because we're teaching students that we don't all have the same needs, and we've got to think about everybody else's needs as well as our own. So just before I come off share screen, at the moment I'm doing free webinars for parents, and I'm also offering a number of these webinars to schools so that I will do it for your whole school team. So if anybody's interested in that, do come to me. I do CPD sessions, and I'm not going to read that out because you can see what I do. And everybody has got my contact details. So if I come off shared screen now, anybody got any questions? Because I think we learn so much about these things. It's when there's lots of questions. What I also ought to say is I am currently looking for 2 or 3 pupil referral units to work with to do some research. So if anybody would be interested in that, do get in touch with me. And I've just seen, I've just closed the chat. So, yeah, I've just seen Catherine's question. Can someone have 2 equally dominant motivators? That is a great question, Catherine, and the answer is yes. And actually, I've seen a number of people that have most of the motivators all scoring the same level as well. So actually, and that is normally a real indicator that this is someone that needs lots of different things to keep them interested and motivated. How to connect? Yeah, Sheila, it is how to connect with the students that have got minimal responses, and that is where I think coaching and mentoring around the different motivators can be really key, so that we are able to really understand what's going on for that individual. And it's about finding those little sparks that we can then work on. So if we can see where students have similar motivators, maybe getting them to work together. There's lots of things that when we're talking about individuals, we can then think, actually, how can we work with this student, knowing what we now know about their drivers, if you like, and their needs, because our motivators are really our needs, and we have to have our needs met to have the energy to be able to achieve the things that we're capable of achieving. I hope that makes sense. Any other questions before we finish. No. Well, I hope that that has been really useful. As I say, I would love to talk to anybody if I can be of any help, and if you've got particular issues, give me a ring and we will look at what we can do. Hi, Julie.
Hi, I just want to say thank you very much, Sarah, because it's really something quite different to what I've seen before when I was teaching about motivation. So I hope that everybody found that, you know, really good food for thought, because it is at the moment, it's so difficult for everyone trying to motivate children, and how much that, you know, involves their mental health and the whole person. So, you know, I just want to say thank you for delivering that to us, and hopefully everybody found that really interesting. So quite a few people, I've got a few people, especially some of the teachers from TUTE, have asked if you would share the webinar with them, or are you happy to do that?
Yeah, I am.
That's great. So yeah, so we were absolutely delighted that Sarah agreed to do this for us. We've got fantastic partners here in TUTE, and I think this is exactly the sort of thing that teachers now need in such a challenging time, that support, which is what we're hoping to deliver to people with, you know, with these webinars. So do get in touch with me if there's anything that you need for your, you know, online provision, and also for Sarah for, you know, supporting all of the teachers to deliver that. So
and actually supporting teachers as well, because you are all going through probably the most challenging time of your careers, and actually as teachers you've all got to look after your well-being. We know this won't be over for a good few months, so actually looking after your motivation is absolutely crucial.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you everybody for your time, and thank you Julie for inviting me to do this.
So it's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye everyone.
Bye.